Hello and good morning. Joe Justice coming to you live on November 28th, 2022. It is the Monday after Thanksgiving. I hope everyone had an amazing Thanksgiving and I hope you had a good time with your friends and family. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the Chinese room. Now, this is a AI thought experiment. I thought we would get a little philosophical this week and talk about some of these more interesting philosophical ideas behind AI and computer learning and intelligence in general, things like that. So, the Chinese room is a thought experiment proposed by a philosopher named John Searle. Now, it comes in some slightly different forms here and there. His original concept of it came out in 1980, and basically it goes kind of like this. So, imagine you're in a room and there's an input, there's a place where you can put cards, and there's an output. There's a place where you can send cards out. So somebody sends a card through the input that has a phrase written in English. Now you've got a bunch of books on the back, and you go through the books and you find the English word and you find the Chinese word that corresponds to that word, and you transpose, you write the Chinese word and you write for the English word, and you put that on the card and you send it to the output. Now, to the person putting the card in and receiving the card out, it looks like the room understands Chinese. It looks like the room is translating Chinese. But the thought experiment is this: does the room actually understand Chinese? Does the room, to answer the question, the person inside certainly doesn't understand Chinese, right? Because they're just following directions. They're just following an algorithm, doing operations based on inputs, and then creating output based on those from the outputs from the steps that they're going through, right? So, does the person understand Chinese? No, but does the room understand Chinese? And that gets a little bit more into the kind of philosophical edge of that. And of course, Searle's point was that no, the room doesn't understand Chinese. This is the computer, which is, obviously the Chinese room is a metaphor for a computer. The computer is not intelligent. The computer does not understand Chinese. The computer does not understand what it's doing. It is simply doing operations on input data, producing output data, and sending it out. But so that gets us into an interesting idea. Now, first of all, that's been discussed quite a bit. So the whole concept of the Chinese room has been discussed quite a bit. Is the room intelligent? Does the room understand Chinese? So it kind of gets what do we mean by understand? What do we mean by can it process? What do we mean by is it intelligent? And so you get into some of those kind of questions. But with the advent of AI and artificial neural networks, we get into a slightly different question, I would argue, because I don't think that's what we're dealing with AI. So the way AI works is instead of following a set of directions, it learns based off of data using weighted neural networks. So basically, and it's got some simplified rules to begin with, but AI is trained on data rather than having a set of instructions. So it does have some rudimentary set of instructions that's called a model. And basically it takes that model, it takes an input, it makes a prediction, and then it compares its prediction to the actual proper output. So that's the training process. That's why, so you're probably familiar with AI using, like you feed an AI 1,000 photos of cats, and then it's able to distinguish the difference between a cat and a dog in photographs because you're training it, right? So you start out with one picture of a cat, and then it compares that to another picture and says, is this a cat? And the answer is no. So then it back propagates all of that data and says, this isn't a cat, so it doesn't find anything. Or alternatively, if it does find a cat, then it back propagates all of that through the neural network and it says this is a cat. So what you're looking at here is something a little bit different than the Chinese room. So the Chinese room is if the instructions and the information are kind of all from the outside. So you've got the book of instructions, right? That's kind of the algorithms. And those were written by somebody else. And then the person inside the room is only following the directions, right? So they're getting data, following a series of directions, a series of steps. That's the algorithms. And then sending out data, again, based on those algorithms. Now, the Chinese room, that's the way that computers operate outside of an AI neural network. That's the way that we've designed systems to work now. But the AI is a little bit different. So it's more like having a reference manual, but then and then instead of just having that reference manual, instead of just having so the reference manual kind of operates as, in this metaphor, it would kind of be the basic model. And then the person inside the box would guess at what it was and then send the output out. And then an expert, that's the human trainer, would then say, no, you got this wrong, you got that wrong, this would be better this way, this would be better that way. And then that person inside the box would then make notes, update things, go through that reference manual, maybe put notes in the margins, maybe add little notes to the side, maybe put little sticky notes on there. That's that back propagation process. So what you're dealing with in that scenario is quite a bit different because the data, the model, and the operations all exist in the same space. Now that's different than the Chinese room that was proposed by John Searle. John Searle's kind of the algorithms are almost, you can kind of think of them as from God, like they're there, they're set, they're reference, right? So they came externally, they came in. Now, yes, the feedback comes externally in an AI model, right? But inside the room, the model can be updated. And that puts both the algorithms, the data, and the back propagation, everything's all in one room. So they can begin to manipulate and modify. And that's exactly the way current AI algorithms operate. So again, let's take an actual concrete example. They'll have a language model, and the language model can be based on it could be based on like a basic understanding of like what's a verb, what's a noun, how to put them in order, what's an adjective, so forth and so on. Let's say it learns English. Well, you could give it all of the plays written by Shakespeare. And then it would start out, it would write what it considered to be a Shakespearean play, which would start out as complete garbage, right? It would just be a series of phrases. And then it would look at the Shakespearean play and it would compare it and say, no, he used this word here, he used that word there, he didn't follow this adjective, and so forth. So then it back propagates. It fills in all of that data and says, instead of using this word here, this word here, this word here, and then it uses that, updates everything again. And that's very similar in more of the Chinese room type scenario. That would be updating the model. That would be going through all those reference manuals and adding notes and maybe erasing parts, maybe putting in little sticky notes, putting stuff in the margins. So you see, that's very different. That's very, very different. That's not just operating. That is actually manipulating the data, the processes, the algorithms, everything is all in the same space, right? It doesn't come externally. And then it's trained externally. So in that scenario, my question for you is this. In that scenario, is the Chinese room intelligent? Does the Chinese room understand Chinese? Now that's a much different worldview than the original Chinese room experiment, where it's just doing a series of operations based on reference manuals. If the room is actually updating, changing, learning, asking and receiving new data, and then modifying the information that's in the room because it has access to it, is that fundamentally different And if so, does that mean that the Chinese room in that scenario is in fact intelligent and understands Chinese? Because if it does, that means that artificial intelligence using a neural network is intelligence. And that might change a lot of things. Something to think about. Have a great day today, and I will see you tomorrow.